Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, friends, so today is day 2 of the retreat, and yesterday we were talking about the origins sort of our conditioned mind. How did our mind get involved in this, the outer tangle and the inner tangle of its karmically connected habits and conditionings, and how that leads to us being caught in the web of karmic results, having to experience all kinds of problems and sufferings due to our unskillful actions that are based on ignorance. So actually ignorance, greed, and hatred are the 3 kind of general categories of defilements, that all the defilements we could think about in our mind fall under the categories of ignorance, greed, and hatred. And ignorance basically is not knowing the truth, or it's ignoring. It comes from ignore, right? So ignorance. So we're ignoring the truth of nature of the mind because of our conditioning and programming and wrong views, and being born into places where they don't believe in Dhamma or truth, and they're caught up in this materialistic type of life, and it's quite opposite of Dhamma practice. So anyway, because of that, we've allowed the mind to get caught up in greed and hatred, which are connected to the past and the future. We already talked about that yesterday, about how that the past and the future are created in the young baby's mind, and they're connected with pleasant feeling and painful feeling. And so I wanted to continue kind of where we left off in terms of how do we get back to refine our mind. Because the source of all of our thoughts is within the unconscious mind. That means all the memories, and the conditionings, and the learning and everything that we've ever accumulated. It's basically somewhere there in the unconditioned mind. The unconditioned mind is a very mysterious thing, and nobody really knows what it is or where it is. It's one of these kind of unanswerable questions. Everybody thinks they know, but not many people really know. But the only thing is that we can observe it. We can observe its activities and observe the effects that it has on our mind and life in keeping us enmeshed in the web of karma and our, the negative actions, actions out of greed, hatred, and delusion, which are the sort of the roots of suffering. Now, so we started our discussion of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is the Buddha's grand discourse, the grand exposition of really the practice of meditation, especially the meditation that leads directly to overcoming ignorance and developing wisdom. So the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the first one being mindfulness of the body. And we already talked about that yesterday. Because the mind operates through the body, first we have to bring our mind to find the body. Because even though we live in the body, most people don't feel it, except for maybe, probably even that's 75% of the time. You're actually knowing that you're in the body. Most of the time we're in the mind. Lost in the past and the future. And not paying attention to what we're doing. That's why every single accident that you can think of, every accident that we happen to do, whether we cut our finger cutting vegetables, or we fall off a bicycle, or get in a car wreck, or fall off a ladder, and break our leg, it's due to not being mindful. That means not being centered and really aware of what we're doing. And even a lapse of 1 second can cause our death, if you're unmindful. So anyway, bringing the mind to first find the body. We use the breath to kind of find the outer body, such as with the breathing, and then we go under the skin to feel the subtler body. That means the sensations that are there, and developing concentration and getting centered and grounded in the breathing body. And that's basically the starting point. As I mentioned, the breathing body is ground zero to really our consciousness and mind, because that's where it operates through. And the breathing body is, the whole world arises through, the nervous system. Everything that we hear, see, taste, smell, touch, and think about are essentially vibrations that are coming through the senses and vibrating through the nervous system to reach the brain, where then we have perception. And this is where the magic happens, the magic of the mind. There's a book written by a well-known Sri Lankan monk. He passed away now, but it's called Magic of the Mind. It's about how the mind creates out of essentially empty vibrations, it creates the world. It's very profound, but it's the teaching of the Buddha. And really it's the deepest level of insight. And almost all of the teachings of the Dhamma, Buddhist teachings, are geared toward eventually being able to directly observe the mind and being able to make changes in the way that we think and act in our habits, in order to extricate the consciousness from its trap, self-created trap. So anyway, so we talked about the body already, getting centered in the body, and I want to talk more about, we've been talking about sensations or feelings. So the second kind of foundation of the mindfulness, once one has gotten centered in the body, and it's like the breathing and getting centered in the body is like going into a movie theater and getting a balcony seat. Right? How many people have had a balcony seat in a movie theater before? Pretty neat, huh? And having a grand view of everything. Well, that's exactly what mindfulness meditation is, especially the Vipassana meditation. When you get grounded in the body, it's like you've taken a front row seat to watch the body and mind, as I've been suggesting to you so many times already, right? Watching the body and mind. Have you heard that at all in the last day or two? Just watch the body sitting and breathing. The inbuilt video camera. So some of you said that you've started to be able to kind of do that a little bit and be able to hold that kind of, that just watching the body sitting and breathing, and there's kind of a disconnected space there. Just like at the movie theater, there's a space between you and the screen, right? And so there's that detachment. So the same way in the four foundations of mindfulness, that's really the starting point, is being able to get a front row seat, a balcony seat to the body and mind, the breathing body, and then we'll be able to observe and feel all the vibrations that are coming through the senses, and even observe the way our mind thinks and various thoughts that arise. So the level of the second level of foundation of mindfulness is mindfulness of feelings. It's called feelings. The word is Vedana in the Pali language, Vedana. It is translated as feeling, but it's actually it's kind of a misleading, because in English the word feeling, we ask a person, "How do you feel today?" They might feel, "Well, I'm not feeling so well. I'm not feeling. I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling happy." Well, these are not Vedana. These are emotions. They're mental concepts. They're mental reactions to the feelings. They come later, but they're actually not feelings. Feelings are just, as the way that Buddha described it, are the initial unpleasant or pleasant sensations, the raw, unpleasant or pleasant sensations that we're experiencing in our body, but not only that, from what you hear, see, taste, smell. Now, if I was to curse at you, there'd be a sound coming in your ear and you'd probably have an unpleasant feeling, right? Or shocked. Why would Bhante say that? So, but it's simply that unpleasant sort of vibration that is the feeling. And then we think about it, and then we interpret that as being, oh, I'm sad, or I'm happy, I'm depressed, or whatever. So it is connected to an unpleasant feeling, but to be technically correct, the Vedana is not that kind of an emotion. But anyway, I know that sounds a little technical, but it's important to understanding the evolution of our consciousness and the evolution of how the world is created within our mind. So basically, these pleasant and pain, everything we've ever experienced, as I mentioned with the baby yesterday, the mind has categorized them as these certain ones give pleasure, are sources of pleasurable feeling, or we imagine they are. And these other things are sources of painful feeling, and we don't like them. So likes and dislikes are based upon pleasurable feeling and unpleasurable feeling. Now there's a third type of feeling, which is called neutral feeling. But a neutral feeling are usually just the very light ones that kind of come and go in the background. They're usually not very strong, so we don't really pay much attention to them. But it's the pleasant ones and the painful ones that the mind grasps at, and then creates some thoughts and then karmic actions in order to get them or to get away from them. So the neutral feelings are, let's say, just the buzzing sound of the fan in the background when you're meditating. It doesn't really, once you get used to it, it's like white noise. Or other sensations in the body that don't really grab your mind. like maybe the clothing touching the skin. It's kind of it's not painful or not necessarily pleasant. But the parts that affect us the most are the painful and pleasant ones, because that's what trigger off our thoughts, worries, fears, anxieties, greed, lust, hatred, and so on. So we'll stick to kind of focusing on the pleasurable and painful feelings. But they're sensations. They come from the sensations. And basically everything is just a sensation. There's a saying by some wise person, could have been the Buddha, but the world is a feeling. The world is a feeling. Now, what's the meaning of that? Well, basically I would call it, the world is a vibration. So even when you're looking here, what's actually happening is that some color in some shapes is striking your eye. And basically it's just a vibration. Vibrations are going through the air and striking your eye. Have you ever squinted? Oh, I didn't light the candle. Why don't you go ahead and light that? Somebody light that candle for me. Guess what I'm going to do already? Okay, now look at that candle and kind of squint your eyes and see if you can see some golden rays coming toward you that feel like they're out here. Is anybody able to see that? If you squint, you have to kind of squint. Okay, that's the vibration. That's what's striking your eye. You're not looking at the candle itself, you're looking at these rays that are striking your eye. And that's what happens with everything that you see. You're only seeing these vibrations. Of course, it has a source, but what's actually striking your eye is the vibrations. In the same way, if you're out outside and you squint at the sun, you're going to see the same thing. Because when we're looking with both eyes, that's like a camera focus. And so it focuses in to the object and those rays disappear. And then the object looks like it's something just, standing separate from us. And that's what's called Maya, how the idea of illusion arises. So, but the point is, what I'm trying to emphasize is that, what comes through our senses is just vibrations. Now close your eyes. Now what is coming through your ear? Am I coming into your ear? Or is just sound vibrations striking your eardrum and sending vibrations through your nervous system? But because of memory, just like Google, it goes into the memory and it says that particular sound is Bhante Rahula's voice, or the voice of the fan, and that because you've learned it. And so the same way with everything else, a certain smell comes by, whether it's an unpleasant smell, maybe somebody let some bad air out the backside and wafting by, or maybe the sweet smell of the flowers, attractive, nice smell. But all these are basically vibrations. They don't really mean anything except for what we've learned it since we were a child, or in some cases even had come from past lives and had been carried over as memories and seeds of memories to come back again. So that means that basically everything we experience is just a vibration. It's the brain that turns those vibrations into objects. again through memory and through habitual practice. And that the way we have learned to either like the object or dislike the object. So whenever you see a certain person that you had some intercation with in the past, immediately the mind has already prejudged that person as being the way you remember the person from years ago, even though they might have totally changed now. But when you see them again, you're still judging them from the past. In the same way with everything else you've experienced since you were a baby or a child. That's been carried forth through repetition and through just the conditioning pretty much of the world. So that's important to understand, especially in Vipassana practice, in gaining insight. And it's from those vibrations that perceptions arise. And perception is simply the mental picture created from the vibration. So again, close your eyes. Now you're hearing this voice, but yet probably a mental picture, or at least an idea that that's, Rahula's voice is in your mind. I mean, is it or not? I don't know. Somebody raise your hand. And you didn't even will it to come. You didn't even try to do it, but it comes automatically because of the neural pathways that have been created in the brain and nervous system. These things all happen spontaneously. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we couldn't exist in the world without that to a large extent. But the problem is that people get deluded and thinking these objects are some kind of absolute value, and then the liking or disliking of them gets fixed in our mind, and that prevents us from having a fresh experience with certain objects. And it comes from that kind of delusion. And this is where I usually tell a story from my childhood, which really sold me on the Buddhism, actually, which really convinced me that the Dhamma was something, real. How many of you have heard my famous avocado story? So quite a lot of you, maybe some haven't. Anybody? Should I repeat it? I don't know. No?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, but this is really what sold me on Dhamma. So when I was young in California, we lived near an avocado orchard in Riverside, California. And my mother used to make us have prepared avocado salads 2 or 3 times a week during the season. And but for some reason I hated avocados. I didn't like them. And I don't know why. Maybe in a past life I choked on one and died from choking on avocado seed. I don't know, it could have been. But I don't have positive proof. Okay? But that's the way karma works. So I hated avocados. And just my mother, she would tell me in the morning, oh, we're having avocados for dinner, and go collect some in the orchard because they fall on the trees, the ground. Or maybe she bought them in the store, I don't know. But anyway, just hearing the thought of having avocados for dinner would send a kind of a chill up my spine. Sometimes you feel that kind of thing. And I started thinking, oh my God, not again. What am I going to do? And so I suffered just by thinking about it. And then, but we had a cat who for some reason liked avocados. And so I used to let the cat in the house before dinner, because he used to roam around outside. Because I used to feed the avocados to the cat under the table. So I used to bring him in, and that's where he would sit under the table during dinner. Anyway, so at dinner time, the mother brought the avocados in, and I, looking at it, I had the same reaction, kind of this negative reaction. And then I had to bring it up and kind of smell them, and the same, another negative reaction. And when I actually had to bite it, taste it, I would have almost a gag reflex. And once or twice I might have even vomited. And so I suffered in 5 ways because I thought avocados were evil. But my father, my brother, my mother, they loved avocados. They were wolfing them down. So if avocados were inherently evil, then every person should have the same reaction to them. But we know people don't. And it's not just for avocados, it's for everything under the sun, right? Music, foods, everything. Paintings, art. And people will fight and even kill over, not agreeing what is right or wrong, or, the things. But anyway, so when the parents weren't looking, I'd feed the avocado to the cat at the table. And then my parents would finish, they'd all go into the den. You know what a den is? I think these days and age, maybe no more dens in the house. Young people, have you heard what a den is?
Like a living room?
It's a room where usually you had the TV in the room, maybe there's some books, and where the family kind of got together in the evenings and so on. So there's only one TV back in those days. This was back in the 50s, in the early 60s. But and there was only like 5 channels on the whole TV. So anyway, they'd be watching TV and I'd be struggling looking at these avocados. But I'd feed the rest to the cat. Then I'd take my plate and I'd say, "Ma, I finished my dinner." So I'd get dessert, right? An apple pie with ice cream or something. Couldn't have dessert until we finished our dinner. Good old mothers. Right? So I said, "Ma, I finished my dinner." And she would say, "Good little boy." What did I do?
Lied to your mother.
Told my mother a lie. Can you believe that? Oh my God. Po, Sri Lanka, right? So I'm just telling you this because that's what this clinging to our ideas of liking, disliking objects can lead to us breaking precepts. It leads to killing, leads to lying, stealing, and all the other types of negative behaviors. And it leads to that by clinging on to our ideas of what are good. We cling to what we like, and if anybody threatens that or what we don't like, then we, we might do negative actions. So anyway, that's not the end of the story. So then years later, when I went to India and I started, reading about the Dhamma, and I went to this meditation course, and we were learning about the mind and about illusion and about these things, how the mind creates all these things. And I started to remember this hatred I had to avocados. And I said, maybe I should apply this to, try to overcome my hatred to avocados. And then later on, I went down to South India where I took a yoga course, a 6-month yoga training in Pondicherry, India. Because I knew I was going to become a monk a little bit later, and I wanted to get some yoga training, thinking that would help me in my ascetic life as a monk living in the jungles and so on. That was my fantasy. So, and the yoga teacher was extolling the virtues of avocados. saying they're one of the best fruits, healthy and all that. They're saying that now too. This is already more than 50 years ago, so it's nothing new. But so I thought, okay, and I had access. They sold some avocados there in India, and I could get a hold of them. So I'm going to test this Dhamma, see if I can change my mind. So in the beginning, I had to mix the avocado with some other food, hold my nose, kind of put that in there. And even then I would have some kind of reflex because I knew it was an avocado. But I was trying to tell myself, avocados are good, avocados are good. It's all in the mind, it's all in the mind. And so by little, after a couple of days, I could take my hand off my nose and little by little stop mixing it with other food. And then finally I was able to eat it pretty much plain, not necessarily liking it, but at least not having any real, negative reactions. And then, even later on, I, began to like them. So I was able to use the Dhamma to, change the mind. And I thought, wow, if I can do that for avocados, I've suffered so many years, clinging to this idea of avocados. For what? Caused me so much suffering, so many tears. And so you can apply that to virtually anything else. So probably everybody has their own avocado, right? Your own story, avocado story. But anyway, that's what sold me on the Dhamma, and about how the neuroplasticity, how you can change the brain, and how the brain is just conditioned in programming, and carrying out, perpetuating the suffering that people undergo due to their not knowing the truth, and by being caught in their habits, never wanting to challenge them because it seems too difficult. So anyway, I'm just mentioning that just to illustrate that point about the illusion. So that's the transition between feeling and perception. Okay, there's something called the 5 aggregates. How many people have heard of the 5 aggregates? The big 5, right? Okay, so that's basically what our body and mind is operates. Is composed of these 5 aggregates. That means material form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. So only one of those aggregates is material form. That means the vibrations, the cells and molecules and atoms that make up every single piece of matter in the world, including these bodies, rocks, trees, the universe, but especially these bodies, as those elemental vibrations of earth, fire, water, air. But basically they're just vibrations. They're the way the pure energy, and this comes to the relationship between quantum physics, that matter is just energy. And basically it is, from a scientific viewpoint, but even the Buddha was talking about that. So the material aggregate is simply the sound vibrations, visible vibrations, odor vibrations, taste vibrations, tactile skin, body vibrations, and even our mental vibrations. But that's not considered the materiality, but the 5 physical ones. That's why I like to say that the Vedana is basically the vibrations. And then the perception is the way that the mind turns the vibration, which really doesn't mean much. If you never heard a sound before in your life, and all of a sudden you just heard a sound, would you know what it is? You probably wouldn't even think about it much. You would just pass by and it wouldn't really trigger off your mind. because it's because of the memory and the perception that's connected with the vibration that triggers off our thoughts. So the way that the vibration is turned into the perception, and that's where the Vipassana meditation really gets going. It's when it gets deep. When you're sitting and watching the body, sitting, breathing, and you hear a sound. That's why part of the mindfulness training is when you hear a sound, it's just hearing. Don't say, I'm hearing Bhante's voice, just hearing. Or if you hear that rat running around back there, just hearing. Because if the idea of a rat comes in your mind, hope it doesn't crawl on me. Actually, I hope it jumps on my head and see your reaction. That's happened before. I was in the forest one time. I was in Germany. We were out in the forest meditating, and a squirrel jumped on top of my head. And people heard some noise and opened their eyes and saw the squirrel on top of my head. They freaked out. There's another interesting story too. But anyway, so coming back to this, the 5 aggregates, because this is the most important aspect of the Vipassana meditation. Because if you study the Buddha's teaching, you see it is actually exactly the 5 aggregates. Because in the Buddha's definition of suffering, Buddha gave 3 definitions of suffering. Birth, old age, disease, death, getting broken bones, and all kinds of physical ailments and problems with the body is suffering. Does anybody doubt that? And then the mental reactions to that: grief, worry, fear, despair, crying, lamentation, due to the effects of these material things. When you yourself are stricken with a disease, when your parents or loved ones stricken with a disease, you get killed in an accident, your house burns down, your material possessions, the mind suffers on account. So that's called gross suffering. And then the second level of suffering is the mental suffering, not getting what you want and getting what you don't want is suffering. And that basically means discontent, not being contented with the present moment. So we're always wanting something else, and if we don't get what we want, we suffer. And if we get things that we don't want, then we also suffer. And we worry about things coming to us that we don't want to happen. We worry a lot, plan, scheme how to prevent things from happening, but they happen anyway. And then we suffer even double. You get double trouble. So, and then the third level, he said, in short. Now people might get confused, what is all this? Then he said, in short, the 5 aggregates of clinging are dukkha. Sure, you've heard that before, right? Okay, 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. So right there, it's right there in the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. And that's why it's the main focus of the whole of the Buddha's teaching, especially in the meditation teachings and training. So the 4 aggregates of feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness, those are called the mind. Collectively, when we talk about the mind isn't just a thing inside your brain or somewhere like that. The mind is a very complicated thing. But we call the mental process. The mind is a mental process of feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. Consciousness, if there was anything to be called the mind, it would be consciousness or awareness. The pure mind, or pure awareness, as it's sometimes called. But only arhants have that, ultimately have reestablish themselves in pure awareness. Everybody else has consciousness. That means ego consciousness that's caught in the web of likes and dislikes and so on. So that's part of the developing the right understanding, clear comprehension. So in the practice of mindfulness, nowadays, people talk about mindfulness, even newscasters use the term mindfulness, sports stars use the term mindfulness. All these people are talking mindfulness, mindfulness, mindfulness. But the Buddha didn't teach mindfulness, he taught right mindfulness. And also he taught clear comprehension. Right mindfulness means having clear comprehension with it. That means understanding what you're mindful of. It's not just being mindful, it's having that understanding of what it is you're mindful of. How does this object appear in the mind? How does it continue? How does it cause greed and hatred? That is part of the clear comprehension that comes with through the practice of the meditation. And even in the Satipatthana Sutta, that's the Buddha mentions that, but most people don't read the Satipatthana Sutta, they just hear people talking about mindfulness. But if you actually read the sutta, where mindfulness came from, after being mindful of the body, then the person understands, how does this body arise? How does it continue? How does it cease? How do these feelings arise? How do they continue? And how do they cease? And how do they keep from arising again in the future? And then the same with perceptions, the same with the thoughts, and even the consciousness. So that's part of the clear comprehension, or the insights. Anyway, I don't want to make it too complicated, but does anybody have any questions so far about anything I've just been talking about?
Are you going to talk about volition, or did you kind of cover that already? That from perception it goes to volition?
I haven't explained it in full, no, not yet. I don't want to give up all my secrets yet. Because you can't see one until you've seen the other one. In other words, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 5 aggregates, all these other lists of things that you read about in the Buddhist teaching, they're listed in specific order for a specific reason. That's because usually the first one's the easiest thing to practice, and you need that foundation to be able to clearly see the one above that. So first you have to get grounded in the body and sort of have that detachment to the body so you can clearly see the sensations that are coming through the body. And you have to be able to clearly see the vibrations to see how they're turned into objects. And they have to see how the mind's identifying the object before you react to it, before you can see the reaction, because each one is subtler. Sensations are subtler than the gross physical body. Perceptions are subtler than Vedana. Volition is even subtler than perception. And in consciousness, which is the most subtle, is subtler than that. So you can't just jump to trying to find out what consciousness is without, or learning to manage it without having first gone through the steps. It's the same way in learning in the university. You got to go through 4 years of college, right? Or you got to go through 2 years of college before you can start your main subjects and so on. You have to learn a lot of basics. Or when you're growing up in school, we had to learn arithmetic first. We had to learn multiplication tables. And then we learned algebra, and then geometry, and then trigonometry, and then maybe calculus. But if you just try to immediately learn calculus without learning the other things, it would, take you much longer or be much more difficult. So it's kind of similar in the development of, mindfulness and concentration.
Bhante, I have a question. So, let's say that when you meditate, then there's a sound vibration. Let's say just last night, today morning, there was a rat was making a sound. Right? So, how can we make it to practice? It's just a sound vibration. That's why when we meditate, how can we meditate like using it as a sound vibration?
That's what you do. You ask yourself, what is this vibration? What is a rat? Why do I think it's a rat? Your eyes are closed, you're thinking it's a rat. Why? You got to ask yourself these questions. These are the questions the Buddha asked himself. And then you get the answer by logical thinking. Why do you call me Bhante Rahula and not Bhante G or Bhante Dhammasiri or thousands of other monks? Every single thing that we've ever identified in the world, people, this and that, is because of these perceptions and memories that you have accumulated, these perceptions that you've accumulated in the mind, and whenever a similar thing arises, it triggers off that identification.
So when we meditate, we don't really need to recognize it's just a sound vibration.
You're going to recognize it unless you're in the third jhana or the second jhana. But you won't react to it. But what we train ourselves in mindfulness is if you hear a sound, you just think it's hearing. That means it's just a hearing vibration. And that sort of cuts off the further thinking about it. Because when we understand what something is, then it's easier to let go of it. You're thinking you're hearing all these objects, but actually they're just thought creations in your mind. All you hear is vibration, sound vibration. So when you see something, it's just seeing. When you hear something, it's just hearing. When you smell something, it's just smelling. When you're tasting something, it's just tasting, or flavor. When you're feeling something, it's just feeling. When you're thinking something, it's just thinking. And so by labeling it like that, it doesn't have any meaning really yet. So you're short-circuiting the brain function. The transition from just pure sensory reception, it has to go through a synapse or whatever they call it, and then channeled into a part of the brain's memory, or somehow how it arises, that then this thing pops into your mind. But see, what mindfulness and concentration does, it acts as a switch. And you don't flip the switch. You keep it open, or you flip it the other way and rechannel that energy into wisdom. Instead of channeling the energy into ignorance, you channel it into wisdom. That means the opposite. So let's say, you started to think ill will towards somebody. And you say, let's say you were meditating, and for some reason you hear something or something happened, and you start thinking about somebody who, owes you money, or told a lie about you, or trying to take your job, or whatever. Kill somebody, a friend of yours or something. And immediately the thought of ill will would come into the mind probably. But instead you divert it. before it builds up into thought, you divert it and immediately start thinking metta. Okay, this person might have done these things, but they did that some time ago, did that through ignorance. Maybe they're not the same person now. They don't know what they're doing. They're also caught in delusion, just like I am. Give them a break. And so that kind of analytical thinking could help you to stop creating the ill will thoughts and rechannel it into having compassion for this person who's already created bad karma for himself. And no amount of your hating that person is really going to change that person. And it makes us sick ourselves. So these are the way called skillful thinking, and called part of clear comprehension, and what is called Dhamma Vichaya, investigation of the Dhamma, which uses some degree of thinking in order to rechannel that energy from going totally into the, to the negative thoughts, and then triggering off volition. Because he asked about volition. So after we've identified an object and it triggers off our emotions, then that leads to some kind of action, like a karmic action. Maybe you'd get up from your seat and go in the other room and curse out somebody if that's what the situation was. Or, do some negative action. So that's the volition. So that happens after we've already determined this person is evil or they're good, and then we take our action based on that. And we can cut off those thoughts by just before that, so that we can divert that volition into more positive volition too, as I was mentioning. But I'm going to talk more about that probably tomorrow too. But for today, if you happen to get into a state of concentration, and you're quite aware, instead of just being complacent, it's feel good, yeah, that you gotta double down. That's when you have to double down and start understanding the nature of what you're experiencing. And that's why don't get caught in these pleasurable feelings. And that's why painful and unpleasant feelings are really the grist of meditation. Because until you can develop equanimity and understanding, especially to the negative things, because that's what causes us suffering. The positive things don't cause us that much suffering. It's our anger and other defilements that lead to cursing, lying, cheating, stealing, and those things. That's what brings the most gross suffering in our life. So that is what we should focus on first in learning how to use these methods of mindfulness and clear comprehension so that we can gradually change the way we think, like I did with the avocados, and the way that we react. So that's what. So in your meditation, once you've developed the ability to just watch the body sitting and breathing, then the breathing is no longer that important. But pay attention to sounds, and pay attention to the painful sensations arising. Be alert for little itches, little pinpricks, little things. I know there's a lot going on. Your mind is not focused enough to feel them. How many people have felt like some sensations on their arm, like little ants were maybe biting you or something like that? Okay, well, that would be considered an unpleasant sensation. But what is that? It's microbes fornicating on your arm. Excuse my French. having a party. Ask any biologist, they'll tell you. We have dead cells that are constantly dying on our skin, and there's microbes that live in our body, on our body. They're invisible, of course, but you know, how many have seen these pictures of them enlarged through a microscope? They look like monsters, don't they? They're invisible, but they're there. And they're walking around doing things, eating our dead blood cells. So that's what you're feeling, or at least part of it. And there's nothing you can do about it. And they're not really that painful. Actually, you can enjoy them. Because you see that you're making progress by observing these sensations and then knowing that they're just impermanent and they're not going to hurt you or kill you. And you just learn to endure them. And you'll see that if you don't pay attention to them, they'll vanish within a second or two, or maybe 3 or 4 seconds, or maybe 2 or 3 minutes, or maybe 2 or 3 hours. But anyway, they'll change. Or even while they seem to last, they're changing. And so this is what you investigate. And anything comes in that takes your attention, you put the microscope on it. What is this? What's it made of? How does it arise? How does it persist? How does it cease? Because when you're thinking, that's called applied thinking. That's controlled thinking. That's not thinking about, you know, all the negative things that you might be thinking about. It's developing what is called the Chintamaya Panya. And that's part of the right understanding. Anyway, and you can just learn to actually enjoy feeling all those things. Even on the, you can feel like 20 or 30 or even more of those kind of prickly, biting sensations all over the body if you have really deep awareness. And just sitting there with that equanimity and not trying to get rid of them, that builds a very powerful mind. Because that will translate into putting up with all the other negative and painful things that you might be hearing out on, you know, in the street or from others or things like that. So that's why there's a saying, you have to go through hell to get to heaven. That means you have to go through the painful feelings in order to transcend them and reach equanimity. If you don't, if you just try to push away the painful feelings and imagine everything just peachy keen, it's not going to work. Because the source of it has not been transformed. And when I was in Sri Lanka, as a young monk, I was a gung-ho monk. You know what a gung-ho monk is, right? So anyway, I was a young monk. And I had these ideas, meditate in the forest, be a forest monk. And I was doing it. So in the monastery I was at, they had big mosquitoes, maduro. They're very thirsty. And they used to come out about 5 o'clock in the afternoon in the monasteries. And in the beginning, I used to swab myself with mosquito repellent and stuff like that. And then I realized, well, that's kind of toxic and stuff like that, and trying to avoid that. And then I said, no, I'm going to apply this Dhamma. So I sat out there without any mosquito cream, and I even took my shirts off and just sitting from bare, from the waist up, and letting them cover my body and biting. And I would just send out metta. And I would think, I ate a lot of meat and shed the blood of animals when I was young, so eat your fill, and send them metta, may you be well and happy. And it was painful. I was, getting 20 or 30 bites at the same time. But afterward, because I was sending out metta to them, I didn't have any real itching or rashes from that, and hardly the welts disappeared within a very, very short time. And one time a friend of mine, another Sri Lankan monk who I was friends with, and he used to come around to have a Dhamma chat with me in the evening. And so he was coming towards me, and he came up to me and he saw my body was covered with mosquitoes, and he started to cry and he says, Reverend sir, you're covered with mosquitoes. Let me fan them off. I said, go away, go away. Anyway, but, so that's what you got to do. I mean, so it's a challenge. You have to see the meditation is a challenge. That's what it means by sitting through pains and discomforts and other things. I also did a practice called drop on a dime. It's a kind of a meditation practice I developed. Drop on a dime. That means anywhere, any place, if anybody said, come on, let's sit down and meditate for an hour, I'd sit down. Even in the middle of the Howrah train station in Calcutta. If you can imagine that. Probably you can't, but it's the most noisiest, smelliest place probably in the world. The Howrah railway station in Calcutta. This was back in the 60s. And just sit down outside, anywhere, any condition, and just not be affected by what's going around. Use your wisdom and understanding just to sit there and meditate. So, anyway, I don't want to bore you with all those details. So I think we may stop with that. But the reason why I was saying these things is so that in your meditations, if you're getting bored, like some people get bored, just breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, sitting, breathing. What's next? Well, that's the what's next. You have to focus, double down, and turn up the power of the mental microscope to see the subtler and subtler sensations and the subtler aversions that are rising up. A lot of times you won't see them, because like aversions and thoughts, they're very subtle. And if our mind isn't calm enough and focused enough, we won't see, we won't be, we won't see them clearly. You feel something and you just go like that. Instead, when you resist and you observe the pain, then you can see the mind really getting angry. If you're too quick just to go like that, then you really don't experience aversion too much. But if you resist the temptation to always move and itch, so the pain builds up, then you can really see the anger arising. Why didn't Bhante ring the bell? It's too long. Oh yeah, I know. Or other such sort of thoughts about situations where, people, push your buttons or something else to get some, reaction. So that's why. So these are all things that you can, when they come up, and to apply this understanding of what it is. Why So you got a pain in the legs. So what? Is it going to kill you? Why do you want to move? Who's the one feeling pain? Who owns this body? Me, I do, it's mine. That's the source of the suffering. It all comes back to I, me, and mine. But more on that later. I don't want to scare you too much right now. Okay, so I think we'll finish with that. and get ready to have our meditation.
Sadhu, sadhu.